Candace Owens has, through her own ineptitude and bullheadishness, has managed to ostracize herself from the larger, like, conservative movement that she's been a part of for years. The reason why anybody knows the name Candace Owens is not because she has a great personality, because she was in the right place at the right time. And she has managed to ride that from Turning Point USA to the Daily Wire to a more prominent spot on the world stage, the political stage. But along the way, there have been signs, let's say, that she's never been quite on the up and up. For those who don't remember, or for those who don't know, Candace Owens, and I have a specific article picked out that I will talk about later, because Candace Owens is many things. She is against Black Lives Matter. She is against the Democrats. She is against abortion. She's pretty much towed the mainstream line on most major conservative party issues, including, but not limited to, ones like women's rights, the trans movement, like I mentioned, Black Lives Matter, things that, as a black woman in America, are generally trying to help people like her, people who are not quite as advantaged as her, as we'll see, but people like her.
That. And you know that our community, after the first 100 years, doctor, come on.
That's not
the 100
socialist.
years after slavery, the black community was doing better. We were going up, up, up. Then suddenly they socialized our community via welfare policies, and the black community started going down, down, down.
How do you not see yourself in George Floyd? How do you not see your brother, your cousin? I don't know. My brother and my cousins aren't ingesting fentanyl, resisting. Why would I see myself in George Floyd? What person goes, I really see myself in this drug addict and this person that's been arrested and faced jail stints 9 times. Why am I forced to see myself because, we have a similar melanin complexion?
It tells you what they think of you, though.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they feel that's representative.
There are a lot of things that I believe in personally that would make me either a or an Uncle Tom. The first of them being that I don't support the Black Lives Matter movement whatsoever, because the Black Lives Matter movement does not support me. I think that a better title for that movement would be Black Deaths Matter. They seem to protest, they seem to rage, and they seem to ruin, and they seem to support violence when a black person dies. What about when a black person lives?
Right. You know, in many ways, she is a victim of the culture. And I've said this over and over again ad nauseum, which is just that victimhood has become almost a mental plague upon Black America in particular, because that word racism is being so overused that society is becoming desensitized to it. And we actually can't even recognize it when it actually exists. We think everything is racist.
Here we are, a couple of months away from an election, and there are black people running around saying that we are being lynched in Georgia. Bad news for me. Apparently, I have been banned from the black community again. I've been told that I am not invited to the various cookouts. And the reason why is because I was tweeting, and I said something along the lines of, Juneteenth is ghetto and it's made up, and people were very upset about that.
We're going to find out later that despite her constant profiteering from narratives against Black Lives Matter and constantly talking about how black people these days don't have it as bad as they did back in the day, she has actually literally been the victim of hate speech. Like, she has actually been the victim of racial slurs and racial attacks when she was a kid. Like, she has experience with this stuff, and she will still, like, basically deny that it happens. In less than a year, Candace Owens has gone from a rising political YouTube personality to one of the leading faces of the conservative effort to win back the votes of young and minority Americans. Owens, 28, spends her days zigzagging across the country, speaking at GOP fundraisers and on college campuses as the communications director of Turning Point USA, the country's most prominent and contentious conservative student group, of course, ran by Charlie Kirk. She became the new darling of President Trump at lightning speed when a video of her berating black protesters at the University of California, LA as privileged Americans obsessed with shouting about slavery went viral. Shortly after, rapper Kanye West tweeted, "I love the way Candace Owens thinks." Trump called into Fox and Friends and said Owens was the hottest thing out there right now. And this month, Trump followed a 20-minute face-to-face meeting with Owens at the White House with a tweet about the big impact she was having on politics. The plaudits she's received from the right have been met with equal loathing from the left, which has called Owens out on social media, labeling her stupid, token, and exclusively reactionary, rage-fueled, and hyper-emotional. It has been a stunning ascent for a person who now loudly advocates for Trump but didn't vote for him or anyone in 2016. She didn't vote for Barack Obama in 2012 either. Here are some of her other things. Owens has called Black Lives Matter advocates whiny toddlers, advocated for the end of all welfare programs, and likened black Democrats to slaves on plantations. For Owens, climate change is a lie used to extract dollars from Americans. Abortion is an extermination of black babies. Undocumented immigrants brought back to U.S. as children should be immediately deported, and concern over rising white nationalism is stupid. An opinion she expressed after a white nationalist drove through a group of counter-protesters last summer in Charlottesville, Virginia, killing a woman. So this is 2017. Already we see here, and this is during the start of her ascent, how much playing into these token roles, how much going against what the Republican Party sees as the accepted narrative, like this is a brave truth teller right here. And it is already gotten her an audience with Donald Trump, with the President of the United States. Owen cites George Soros and globalists among the country's most looming threats, and has called for the imprisonment of Hillary and Bill Clinton, James Comey, Robert Mueller, and TV anchors Jake Tapper, Rachel Maddow, and Anderson Cooper, among others. So she is very blatantly playing to already anti-Semitic tropes and openly fascist sentiment. But here's the interesting part. Here's the really interesting part that I particularly love. She grew up in Stamford, Connecticut, and according to her telling, was raised by her grandparents after her parents divorced. Owens rarely speaks of her immediate family, but often invokes her grandfather as a model black American. Listen to this. Listen, do you think that what I'm about to say, in your head, you're like, oh yes, that is what all black Americans should aspire to be. At Turning Point events and in videos, she says her grandfather, Robert Owens, was born in segregated North Carolina, picking cotton and laying out tobacco from the age of 4 on a sharecropping farm. She says he went on to start a business, raise a family, and eventually retire in North Carolina, buying the very land he had once worked. Now, that is all well and good as like a rags to riches story, but I don't think a black man picking cotton is the right frame of reference for like what the ideal of what a black person in America should be. You should start out picking cotton. Owens went to the University of Rhode Island to study journalism, but she said she was forced to leave because of an issue with her student loan. A representative for the university said Owens dropped out after her junior year. Now, here's where it gets really interesting, because mind you, this is 2 years before she is doing presidential shit, advocating for the end of welfare programs. By 2015, Owens was living and working in New York, paying off debt and looking forward to her next move when she and a coworker founded Degree 180, a marketing agency that offered consultation, production, and planning services. The site included a blog that featured writing from Owens on a variety of topics, including anorexia, acne, breakups and dating, and occasionally politics. In one post, she wrote about the, quote, batshit crazy antics of the Republican Tea Party, adding, quote, the good news is they will eventually die off peacefully in their sleep, we hope, and we can get right on with the obvious social change that needs to happen immediately. In the spring of 2016, the women of Degree 180 launched a $75,000 Kickstarter campaign for a new website called Social Autopsy. The idea, according to the promotional video, was to create the first ever search database that combines and allows the public to easily access the digital footprint of individuals and companies. Wave goodbye to cyber bullies and trolls, it announced. The project soon ran into problems. In the pitch, Owens claimed her team had already amassed profiles on thousands of individuals using real Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram posts. Social Autopsy, to a lot of people, felt like an online destination for doxing, the malicious practice of posting identifying details on the internet. These days, Owens acknowledges that the endeavor was well-intentioned but totally naive. In response, people began to dox Owens, posting her address. She received threatening emails and texts, many of them racist, unsurprisingly. This led her to stumble onto one of the internet events that helped fuel the so-called alt-right, Gamergate, which pitted progressive video game developers and their supporters against gamers who revolted against the move to make video games more inclusive. With scant evidence, Owens blamed the progressive side of Gamergate for her doxing and the ultimate failure of Social Autopsy's Kickstarter project, leading her to unexpected allies The Gamergate faction, whose anti-feminist, traditionalist positions often overlapped with politically conservative ones, thanks to prominent Trump supporters Milo Yiannopoulos and Mike Cernovich, known for spreading conspiracy theories and far-right ideology. Now, after she found a little bit of comfort, a little bit of solace in this group, Owens says, "I became a conservative overnight." In an online talk show hosted by libertarian political personality Dave Rubin, "I realized that liberals were actually the racists. Liberals were actually the trolls." At the same time, she explained, Trump's message of fake news began to resonate.
So you have a crazy story, an interesting evolution. You suddenly caught fire, and you're doing pieces all over the place. You were on the Daily Wire this morning. I saw you on Jesse Waters. Was it this past weekend, right?
Correct.
Just a couple of days ago. Saw a clip of that. You're bouncing around. You're making moves. Who is this Candace person? All right, let's just do some history for the people that don't know about you at all.
I'm just a girl that makes videos. The history is I grew up in Stamford, Connecticut. I went to school at the University of Rhode Island, pursued a degree in journalism, which is quite ironic.
Whoa,
Yeah.
someone that studied journalism that's trying to tell the truth? This is fascinating.
Yeah, absolutely.
So already you see here, the real reason that Candace Owens managed to ascend so quickly is that she has a very good handle on image control, right? Like, even in her presentation, when you picture a YouTuber, and I'm probably not what most people like think a YouTuber looks like to begin with, but like when you picture a YouTuber, you might think a gamer, you might think of more like Ninja or PewDiePie or whatever, big names. A well-presented woman who's like dressing like very professionally, business casual even, is so well-groomed in her presentation as far as her talking points. She launches right off of what Dave is saying. This is why she slid so easily into the conservative sphere. Not just because she's useful as that like token person to have around, which she is, don't get me wrong, but more because she fit mercurial in the way that she fit into any lineup that they needed her to fit in. JK Star Candace will grift as a leftist. No, see, here's the thing. We'll get to this in a little bit. Candace won't grift to the left. She is going to go further right. She's going to go to the Groyper side. This is my prediction. I'm making bold predictions here. She's going to start appealing to, or trying, she never fully will. But after anti-Semitism, here's the problem she's trapped herself into, right? Like, she was useful to a massive portion of the conservative base as a black woman speaking out against commonly held narratives about black people in conservatism, right? She was useful as a black person to point to and go like, this black person hates BLM. This black person doesn't think racism is an issue. And so conservatives could hand wave that away. It can help assuage their guilt of like, what if I don't actually understand the black perspective on this? But wait, Candace Owens says it, and obviously she understands everything about it. So, I'm okay to be a white person again. The problem is, in being anti-Semitic, she has ostracized herself from many of the people who found her useful. And now the only people she has left to ingratiate herself into are people who are already racist. People who will never fully accept her because of the color of her skin. Like, it's not like a Tucker Carlson, right? Even though I think there's a lot of similarities between Candace Owens and Tucker Carlson. They both came from pretty well-groomed backgrounds. They both have that, I don't want to say affable, that's not the right word, but that air of competency. Like, which is it's not super easy to find, but they're able to come across in an interview or in a segment as if they understand what they're talking about, right? The thing when Tucker got out of Fox, and he's gone down this road, is he has continued, much like Candace is, to go into a crazier territory, to start appealing more and becoming closer with people like Alex Jones, who are literally like Alex Jones and Nick Fuentes in the last couple months have been like this. Like Nick is on Alex's show all the fucking time. Like, to tell you how far away, what the leaps in logic are from Tucker to Nick. And Tucker, you know, he had white nationalist writing on his show before. Like, that shouldn't be surprising. Candace can't really do that in the same way, because her utility was as the token black person to people at the Daily Wire, to people like TPUSA. She doesn't have a token usefulness to people who are already racist, unless it is in a Kanye capacity, right? Unless it is the most total sellout thing possible. But I think Candace has a lot more like of her faculties about her than Kanye does. She is not like a megalomaniacal egotist. Like, she's certainly egotistical, but she is not megalomaniacal in the same way. Surrounded by yes men who just like appease Kanye's every whim. Yeah. Also, yeah. Uwe Bowling for Columbine. Candace doesn't interview the heavy hitters like Checked Note Cat Turd. Yeah, no, like, the funny thing about Tucker is that he has continued to dwindle in his popularity. And like, I think when he came out of the Fox thing, he really thought, like, oh, I'm Tucker fucking Carlson. Like, I can do this. And he had the big show debut on X because he's, you know, a big fan of the free speech that Elon Musk is doing. And it's just like dwindled down to the point where, yeah, he's interviewing Cat Turd. Like, that is a heavy hitter for him.
After college, I was in a lot of student loan debt. You know, I came from a family that doesn't have any money whatsoever, and I had to just pay it back. So the smartest move for me was to go into finance. I hit the ground running in New York City, worked at a private equity firm for 4 years, left that firm and wanted to do my own anti-bullying startup thing that went really sideways when the left tried to do
a private equity.
And that was my red pill moment.
Really? So
Yeah.
wait, how did?
Okay, so I don't want to like call anybody a liar because I don't know her life, but going from not finishing college to living in New York City with a private equity firm, so, like, some of the math ain't mathin' there. I do not think private equity firms in New York City hire non-college graduates off the street. Like that, I don't know about that one.
Doing an anti-bullying thing get you caught up in the left?
So I don't know if many people that watch this show are familiar with the Gamergate scandal. I certainly wasn't.
I think most of my audience is familiar-ish.
Yeah.
But nobody
Yeah.
fully gets it. I
Yeah.
think. But feel free to take us
Sure.
down that road for a little bit.
Yeah, so long story short, that whole scandal is built on a girl named Zoe Quinn who says that she was attacked by anonymous white men on the internet. And people were saying that that wasn't true, and she said that it was. And
If they were anonymous, how did she know their skin color?
I don't know. If you read the pieces in the media, it's fascinating, you know?
That's a weird
So I was doing an
attribution.
anti-bullying startup that I was really passionate about, and I got a phone call from her, and I put up basically a 3-minute video on Kickstarter teasing what we were going to do. I said this one sentence, which was a figure of speech that I think set the alarms off. I said, what we're doing is figuratively lifting the masks up off of trolls. At the time, she was working at Twitter. She was working for Twitter for something called Crash Override Network, and I immediately received an inbox from her on Twitter saying she'd like to talk to me about and try to convince me that the project that I'm doing is bad, which is very interesting.
Yeah.
So she calls me up, and I have no idea who she is. I don't know what Gamergate is. I don't know what doxing means.
So this is already fascinating because she basically had this idea for a startup, which is how a lot of tech startups happen, is just like a shit ton of investment money or fundraising, and for somebody like an idea that hasn't been tested. And she doesn't know what doxing is, but she is making a website that will compile information on people from their social platforms, like names and addresses. But she doesn't know what doxing is, and she is surprised. And by the way, she has not explained that aspect of it yet in this thing, kind of making her look a little bit better than she should. Yeah, Banana Brains EF. This video is from a while ago. We're still on her ascent. This is a while ago. So yeah, just keep that in mind as we go into this.
It sounds literally the reverse of
Yeah.
what you think she would have called you to say.
Absolutely. Like,
Okay.
she should have been on board with what
Yeah.
I was doing. So totally appreciate the phone call, but I'm not going to pull my Kickstarter. And she started crying. And she said, if you don't, it's going to ruin everything. And she told me that she spends time on 4chan because of what she does, and she saw that people were already talking about my project, and if I didn't pull it, these anonymous white men and Trump supporters, you have to remember this was during the election cycle, were going to come after me and dox my family, which essentially means put up their personal information so people can try to kill them. That's what she says.
So she said this is what they are going to do. So she was oddly threatening you with being doxxed, but it wasn't she that was going to dox you.
She thought I was a total moron, I think, and I'm like, okay, I'm not pulling my project. She hangs up the phone crying. Within 2 hours, we were absolutely inundated. About 4,000 emails via Kickstarter. Like, they have these super obvious screen names, like, Trump or die, Trump 2020, white man behind computer.
That's a good one. That guy's
So, and I'm like, is she kidding? All men, by the way. Everyone was like, Dave at, Bob at no woman.
So much of this fucking doesn't
track. Everything that she tried to warn me about came true within a couple of hours of me refusing to pull my project. So I tweet very quickly, again, not really knowing the bread and butter of the Gamergate scandal. I said, all I can say is that 100% after speaking with Zoe Quinn, this girl was never harassed. She's doing the harassing. And the next morning I woke up, The Guardian, The Washington Post, and New York Magazine were all calling me. I was a nobody with a Kickstarter that was 3 minutes long. Kickstarter pulled my project, and the next day, big media. And in my head, I'm thinking, journalism major, Washington Post, amazing. Like, at that point, I considered myself a liberal, a Democrat, if you will. And so I was like,
that is an important slip up. Her first thought on this story, her first thought when contacted by the Washington Post was, oh, this is amazing. This is going to be great for my career. Important to keep in mind. And her entire, explaining about Gamergate and shit just does not, that doesn't fucking track or make much sense. That Zoe Quinn, she's explaining that Zoe Quinn didn't want other people to get doxxed, and if you continue with this project, more people would get doxxed. That makes perfect fucking sense. I don't, where is the disconnect for you in that? Candace Owens, in 2019, so a couple years after that, she had been touring with TP USA, doing her thing, saying all the other shit. She got in a little bit of trouble for this, actually. I don't know. This is one of her earlier controversies, where she said Hitler was okay until he tried to expand. Hitler was, the things Hitler was doing was good until he tried to, he just got a little bit too full of himself and went on a little bit too far. So for those who don't remember this, because I remember this, pro-Trump personality Candace Owens described Adolf Hitler's plan for Germany as initially okay, while speaking of the same city that the Nazi dictator relentlessly bombed 80 years ago. The remarks came in newly resurfaced video taken in December at a London event launching the British chapter of TPUSA, the conservative campus group she helps lead. Owens was asked by an audience member for her thoughts on the future of nationalist movements. In her response, Owens said nationalism has been given a bad rap before pivoting to the Nazi dictator. This is fascinating because, and you can go see it in my anti-Semitism video, this is exactly the tactic that Nick Fuentes takes. Exactly. To say that, oh, because Hitler was a nationalist, now everybody thinks nationalism is bad, but maybe Hitler was actually doing good stuff, but we're not allowed to talk about that. We're not allowed to say that. Which, if that sounds familiar, congratulations on remembering this video that we're also going to check out later of why we can't talk about Hitler. Funny little similarities in ideology that you noticed. When we say nationalism, first thing people think about, at least in America, is Hitler. He was a National Socialist. If Hitler just wanted to make Germany great and have things run well, okay, fine. The problem is he had dreams outside of Germany. He wanted to globalize. He wanted everybody to be German. To me, that's not nationalism. So in thinking about how it could go bad down the line, I don't really have an issue with nationalism. I really don't. It's an interesting part to note how she was Icarusing just a little bit right here. She was flying close to the sun. But the wings cooled down a little bit. She flew back down. Oh, I forgot about the Blexit movement, that she tried to make black exit, like Brexit, a thing. And it's basically a podcast just talking about how black people shouldn't be Democrats. In her farewell post, Owen cites the Blexit movement, her self-titled podcast, and upcoming book as reasons for stepping away. She assured her followers she will still be associated with the organization's event. I will, of course, still be speaking at all Turning Point conferences. We'll continue to chair the annual Black Leadership Summit in the fall. We couldn't be more excited to share this conversation with the world. Yeah, SVNS on YouTube hate this idea that black people are subscribing to victimhood just because they don't shut up about the very real racism baked into the system of this country that is actually affecting many black people. Yeah, and that is her whole anti-BLM thing, is that she thinks BLM is nothing but it's that conservative stereotype that, oh, BLM, they're just a bunch of spoiled, dumb college kids. Like no black people are actually, it's not, it used to be way worse back in the day. It's like, yeah, why can't it be better now though? Like, you still have people being shot. You still have extrajudicial executions all the fucking time. In the last couple weeks, I've seen multiple police officers shooting like kids. And guess what? They were black. And people are like, well, why did they shoot white kids too? Why don't you talk about that? Because per capita, like I know they've heard this. Per capita, this shit affects black communities and black people more than white people. Per capita. It's very frustrating. And it is even more frustrating to see somebody like Candace Owens use her blackness as a way to excuse other people so that they don't have to think that those are real problems. So that they can look at protesters and go, no, that's actually, like it's fine that protesters are getting tear gassed in the face. It's fine that black people are shot in the street, because trust me, I'm black. Like that's essentially what Candace Owens' job has been for so long. Like she is basically, okay, that's what it is. Because remember when I was talking a second ago about how she's the kind of person who would give Dave Rubin a pass, like an N-word pass. She is basically like that's what she sees herself as for the conservative movement, or that's what the conservative movement sees themselves as. We were talking, somebody brought up the New Norm show, and somebody else brought up the idea that between the dog shit like adult animated series, the New Norm show on premiering exclusively on the X platform, and Mr. Burcham, the dog shit new adult animated series from the Daily Wire, one commonality is that the main protagonist, a old bitter white dude, has a cooler, though still agreeable, black sidekick that agrees with what they say. And it's stuff like that, where it's like it's this kind of get out thing that a lot of conservatives still have ingrained in them, of just like, they still want black people to think they're cool. You know, they don't want to be racist. They want to be like down. They want to be hip. But they're also deeply fucking racist.
By the way, I would have voted for Obama for a third term if I could. Best president in my lifetime, hands down.
And so people like Candace Owens give them a quote, one of the good ones to look at and say like, oh no, like I'm not racist, right? I don't think all black people are bad. I love Candace Owens. But meanwhile, Candace Owens' rhetoric is to say, black people are lazy. Black people are always on welfare. Black people are whiny. Black people need to have more work ethic. Like, her entire existence is to be a living N-word pass, essentially, to excuse the racism of other people because they can point to her and say, I like what that one's saying. And the shit that she's saying is just the racism that they want to say. Conservative commenter Candace Owens said on election night she'll be joining the Daily Wire. I think what you're doing is so important, and the only thing that would make it cooler is if you did it with us. Do you want to just come join? Jeremy Boring asked. Only thing that would make it cooler. What was I just saying about white people wanting black people to approve how cool they are? I think 100% I will take you up on that offer, Owens responded, who then earned a unanimous approval vote from the host to join the outlet. Candace Owens is coming to Nashville, baby. Owens, a vocal supporter of Trump and critic of Black Lives Matter, was a communications director for the conservative Turning Point USA from 2017 to 2019. Now, most of her work on Daily Wire has been the same shit. Like she made up one of the pillars alongside Andrew Klavan, Ben Shapiro, Matt Walsh, of course, Brett Cooper. Each of them trying to like manage this idea as like a brand, right? Like each one of them had their own podcast. Each one of them, I think, had their own like studio that they went to, and they kind of just basically all covered the same shit with, I guess vaguely different personalities. Like I don't think there's much of a functional difference between, like Andrew Klavan and Michael Knowles. Or even Michael Knowles and Ben Shapiro aren't that different. Like, Matt Walsh is more of just I don't know, he's just grumpy and old, so I guess that counts. From a New Yorker article, this gets into, so I purposefully left this article when I was doing research. I decided to leave this article for last because of an element of her backstory it goes into that thus far I've only teased and we have not gone into. I want you to keep in mind the progressive causes she's advocated against, specifically for racism and helping black people. Advocating against welfare, advocating against Black Lives Matter. The multiple times she continues to spread just completely unfounded conspiracies. Anytime something happens, she seemed to jump right on the false flag, right on the, oh, well, something else was happening here. I want you to keep that in your mind as I read this next part. Owens has said that her early years, many of them spent in low-income housing in Stamford, Connecticut, were dysfunctional. Her family moved in with her grandparents when she was 9, and her grandfather Robert became a powerful influence in Owens' life. He was one of 12 children raised on a sharecropping farm in North Carolina. His first job at the age of 5 was laying out tobacco leaves to dry, and according to Owens, he often recalled experiences of growing up black in the Deep South, including violent encounters with the KKK. That history, Owens said, is part of what has made her suspicious of liberals' claims that white nationalism is alive and well in the U.S. In 2019, Owens testified before a Judiciary Committee hearing on the spread of white identity ideology and decried Democrats for fear-mongering about racism, and noted that her grandfather grew up in an America where words like racism and white nationalism held real meaning under the Democratic Party's Jim Crow laws. Now, that's one thing, right? To say that, like, oh, because there was really awful racism when my grandpa was growing up, like, racism today isn't that big. It's not that big of a deal. Like, come on. First off, it's fucking nuts to say that the scourge of white identity and white ideology is non-existent, like, 2 years after Charlottesville. Bonkers. Ridiculous. Especially in the circles she runs in. Like, girl, you were friends with Mike Cernovich and Milo Yiannopoulos. Milo Yiannopoulos, literally, I think he had Kristallnacht as a password on his computer at some point. The idea that she doesn't actually believe that white nationalism was a thing when she was, those were the voices she was flanking herself with, give me a fucking break. So that is one thing, right? Using her own family's history of pain and oppression to say, like, well, that stuff doesn't exist today. Basically telling other black people to pull themselves up by their bootstraps. That's one thing. Listen to this shit. This is what I've saved. In 2007, when Owens was a senior in high school, she got in an argument with a former friend. The boy was suspended, and one night he left nasty voicemails for Owens, calling her the N-word and threatening to kill her. Several other voices could be heard on the recordings. One of them belonged to the 14-year-old son of Stamford's then mayor, Daniel Malloy, who eventually became the governor of Connecticut. Malloy's son declined to comment. At the time, 3 girls were also reportedly facing hate crime charges for attacking Owens in the parking lot of a Blockbuster, where they allegedly kicked her and used racial slurs. Owens stayed out of school for 6 weeks. Her family ultimately received a settlement of more than $37,000 from the school district, but Owens was left deeply scarred by the whole affair. Quote, "I held my head high at school, but when I went home, I cried every single night," she wrote in a 2016 op-ed in the Stamford Advocate. She had come to resent her role as a public victim and felt badly that the case had tarnished the boys' reputations. Quote, "Were they wrong?" she wrote. "Categorically. Should they have been held accountable for their actions? Undeniably. Did they deserve to be branded by society? No." This shows so much of her ideology. No, this was before. This was in 2007. This is when she was in school. And she wrote about the experience in 2016, before she made it big, before she was involved in politics, when she was still working as like a liberal bloggist. Less than lucid, I think she took the wrong lesson. Yeah, I think so. I think the girl who is quite literally had hate crimes done to her. Mind you, hate crimes done as early as 2007. And she still wants to think that she had not, this is not somebody who was insulated from this, who has never had to deal with hate crimes and racism in her life. She has physically dealt with it. And her takeaway was that they shouldn't have their lives ruined over it. At least for the boys who harassed her and called her the N-word. I think Lakeside Flower, I think it is more victim blaming than anything else. And again, I don't want to get too Freudian with it or anything. I don't want to get too introspective. But when you look at the fact that she has a history, her family history of racism being done against people in her family, and she sees her father, who grew up poor, literally picking cotton as a role model, as an ideal black man in America, chart that to literally being racially harassed in high school and saying, oh, they didn't deserve to have their lives ruined over it, to what she is doing now today, or has done for the last several years, being at Daily Wire. Or every time there's a police shooting, every time there's some Black Lives Matter event, it comes back to people who, oh, they aren't actually oppressed. They don't know what real oppression is. It's the protesters' fault for escalating. The police are the ones on the right. Like, it feel like victim blaming, I think it really seems like the through line that has carried her through, emotionally at least, everything. Being open to conservative ideas and being weirdly racist, saying certain things like, oh, what Hitler was doing was okay at a certain point, like literally regurgitating shit Nick Fuentes has said. You'd think there would be somebody who saw these as like warning signs. This is not the case with Candace Owens, apparently, because earlier this year, as the Israel-Hamas war continued to rage on, as Ben Shapiro, who has famously in the past said that Arabs love living in open sewage, who is a vehement genocidal maniac when it comes to this war, Candace Owens decided to take a little bit more of a stand than she usually does. Like this is the stand that she has taken on this, truly out of character for her in the history of everything she's done, because she usually toes the line. Like, what is popular with conservative voters on abortion, on drugs, on crime? That's where she is. Right? Like, she usually does not waver from that. Here, however, she decided to, at least performatively, speak out against Israel. Not necessarily the war, but the influence, quote unquote, triple parentheses, they have in politics. And questioning why you can't talk about that. Which led to Ben Shapiro's Daily Wire cuts ties with Candace Owens following Israel-Hamas comments. Let's talk about it a little bit. Daily Wire and Candace Owens have ended their relationship. Daily Wire co-founder Jeremy Boring tweeted on Friday morning. Quote, "The rumors are true. I am finally free," Owens shared on her own X account. I'm willing to. She does have a NDA that she signed. Owens' feud with Shapiro appeared to begin in November last year when Owens tweeted, "No government anywhere has a right to commit a genocide ever. There is no justification for a genocide. I can't believe this even needs to be said or is even considered the least bit controversial to state." Though she did not mention the conflict by name, her comments were widely interpreted to be referencing the war in Gaza. She later tweeted a Bible verse beginning, "Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God. You cannot serve both God and money," she added. Now, that could be, I think that is personally a reference to Ben Shapiro and Jeremy Boring using their support of the Daily Wire for financial interest. It could also be anti-Semitic, like very easily read as anti-Semitic. Shapiro responded to a tweet on 15th November writing, "Candace, if you feel that taking money from the Daily Wire somehow comes between you and God, by all means quit." Owens replied, "You have been acting unprofessional and emotionally unhinged for weeks now, and we have all had to sit back and allow it and have all tried to exercise exceeding understanding for your raw emotion. But you cross a certain line when you come for scripture and read yourself into it. I will not tolerate it." This was on fucking, like, this was on Maine. Like, this was not like, this was shit that should have been in like a work chat. And it's so funny. Oh, I loved it. Owen said she still did not have any clarity on Mr. Shapiro's criticism of her, that his remarks were just ad hominem attacks. "I can't respond to it on a level of intellect because there's nothing he had expressed in that, at least in that short clip, that he fundamentally disagrees with in terms of what I said." It's because Ben legitimately believes that every Muslim deserves to be murdered. Like, Ben is a sociopath. She finally flew. We saw it a little bit with the Hitler stuff earlier, and here she finally flew too close to the I'm just asking questions, son. And I do want to see that Jimmy Dore clip, so I'm going to pull that up too.
And it was committed by the Bolsheviks, and the leader of them at the time was a Jewish guy.
Well, Henry Kagoda, what really ran the Gulag camp system. So people should read, if you're interested, Alexander Solzhenitsyn talking about how shocking it was to watch the American president linking arms with Stalin, talking about, we're putting an end to the Holocaust in World War II. And Stalin was still mass killing Christians in Russia. I mean, it's an absolute nonsense. And you got to take it back all the way. You know, the Bolshevik Revolution happened. They assassinated the Tsar, I think, in 1880. And then by the time they actually properly took over, I think it was around 1910. And so what was going on in Russia at that time was they immediately took over. They started a gulag system, concentration camps, where they were mass drowning Christians in barges. And this information is readily available, and yet you never learn about it. And people don't want to talk about it. It makes them very uncomfortable.
Well, I didn't hear about it until I heard you talk about it.
Yeah, Henry Kagoda, look him up. It's stunning. I mean, he must have killed alone 15 million people.
Candace,
and this is a person that's not even spoken about. And so that's the reason why Piers just goes, okay, yeah, no, okay, let's move on to the next point. So in my viewpoint, the Israeli government has way too much involvement with the American government, and part of that, this program, and you saw this after October 7th, Congress immediately passed that there would be we would be learning about October 7th in schools as if it was like Pearl Harbor, right? A day that will live in infamy. Why? This is not my country. That's a nonsense. And if the answer is, because it's a day that should live in infamy, why just Israel? Why just Israel?
Right.
Why not also what's happening in Armenia or happening in Nigeria or happening all over the world? Why not a day that will live in infamy? Russia actually just went through a terror attack, and Russia has a lot of Christians. I'm Christian. So if we can just start drafting over days of terror that happen on the basis of our religion, I'd like to draft what just happened in Russia. I want my kids to learn about that in school.
Russia was famously not a great place to be a Jew. Like, famously. I charted the course of the protocols of the elders of Zion in my anti-Semitism video. It was based in Russia. I think she is a deeply incurious person who, despite her constant willingness to be like, oh, I'm just asking questions, I just want to know more, why we gotta question these narratives, she is led constantly to, I think this comes from her being like a contrarian, like at heart. Just go with the thing that is the most fucking insane. We were talking about earlier how she is just she's a contrarian at heart. Like, that is the thing that defines, I feel, her existence at this point.
Can you guys imagine being married to me? I mean, my poor husband, he rolls over, he's like, what are you reading? And I feel like a regular wife says something, I don't know, maybe a love series, Nora Roberts, sweeping her away. Me, on the other hand, he rolled over, he asked me, and I said, oh, I'm reading a flat earth theory. And it dawned into an entire conversation. He's like, why are you reading a flat earth theory? And I'm like, because somebody messaged me on Manect about it, and they included some links, and I'm just reading them. I don't know, I'm just an interested person. No matter what, if there's a bunch of people that believe something, I now want to know what it is that they believe. And of course, he pushed me on this, and he was talking about the earth curvature and science. And I said to him, listen, I'm not a flat earther. I'm not a round earther. Actually, what I am is I am somebody who has left the cult of science. I have left the mega church of science, because what I have now realized is that science, what it is actually, if you think about it, is a pagan faith. I'm gonna give you an example of exactly what it is I'm talking about in case you think you disagree. A woman tweeted this. You may have seen me retweet this over the weekend. Her name is Beth. She wrote this. Years ago, I was assured that an IUD was safe, effective, and could be removed at any point if I decided on having more children. It was FDA approved, after all. Ovarian cysts, surgery, infections, a week in the hospital, and infertility. That was what they meant by safe and effective. And this really hit home for me, and I felt tremendously compassionate for her because I'm obviously of the baby-making age, and so many of my friends are similarly going through fertility issues and similarly realizing that the birth control that they have been given has contributed to that in some way. People that have pelvic inflammatory disease because of the IUD device being in them for decades. And for those of you that are not aware what that is, it's literally a copper device that is inserted into a woman to make it so that she does not become pregnant. It's birth control, and yes, it is marketed as both safe and effective. All the best stuff, by the way, is marketed as safe and effective.
Now, the problem with that is that, yeah, things are generally advised to be safe and effective, but literally any, and this is my professional, not legal advice, if you have a doctor that recommends something to you and they do not extensively go over the risks of the medication or the procedure, you should take legal action against them. That is, legally, they need to inform you of those things. That is why every fucking commercial you see for a medication or anything, like a heartburn medication will be like, may cause dieting and diarrhea, vomit and diarrhea. Like, because they need to tell you that shit. Because guess what? Everybody's body is different, and some people's body will react differently to different chemicals. Some people are born with different reactions to things. And no treatment is going to be a 100% fit for every single person outside of a fucking Band-Aid. Right? Like, there is no treatment or procedure that will 100% work across every age, blood type, ethnic group, chemical composition. Especially when you take into account that people are usually they're going to be taking different medications. They're going to be taking different vitamins. They're going to have different allergies. So the fucking idea that that she is starting off her argument of why science is a cult from one woman's unfortunate experience with an IUD. I was like, IUD? No, that's an explosive device. IUD. You see a very similar thing from Matt Walsh, and you see it a lot from incurious people, where because they don't understand something, or because it might challenge their worldview a little bit to try and understand it more, they automatically hand wave it away as, oh, well, that's not the science I know. Because, like, you see it a lot with TERFs and gender criticals, where they're like, well, it's basic biology, that there's just men and women. It's like, okay, well, that's not what actual scientists and psychiatrists and psychologists and people who have dedicated their lives to studying these things, that's not what they're saying about this. So am I going to trust somebody like Candace Owens or Matt Walsh, whose last science class was probably somewhere around grade 12 for both of them, because neither of them finished college? Or am I going to listen to people who did more than a K through 12 education, who have dedicated their lives to studying and exploring these parts of the human mind, the human experience, and the human body? I don't know. That's a toughie. That's a toughie, for sure.
Without that person being told the information, just having something that comes online inside, something spiritual, maybe as opposed to referring to it as your gut instinct, we should refer to it as the Holy Spirit. And someone takes you and goes, yeah, no, that actually makes no sense. I have suffered from this condition of not trusting authorities when they say something to me that is so obviously stupid my entire life. And I contribute that maybe to coming from the school of hard knocks. Genuinely, I think that I'm grateful. I am grateful for having gone through the school of hard knocks to that exact.
I'm sorry. I'm fucking. I haven't seen this, but the dissonance of saying that trusting the science, quote unquote, trusting the science, is a faith. Yet you are saying that somebody who gets an IUD should get a gut feeling that comes from the Holy Spirit, the third member of the triumvirate. I'm fucking gobsmacked, dog. Like, what? Okay. proceed, fucking, I guess.
The same effect, my husband showed me a clip of Andrew Tate, and he was similarly discussing COVID. He was also one of the voices that was telling people, hey, maybe don't just trust the experts on this one, before it was cool to say it. I think it was maybe just me and the Tate brothers. He's the second most Googled man in the entire world. I know a lot of people feel that they don't understand why he
Okay. Taking scientific advice from a pedophile sex trafficker that's like I could cut it off here. Like this is how far she's fallen from interviewing the fucking president. That's where she started her career. And her hubris, her need to be contrarian, has dragged her to these depths. Like she is truly like a modern Icarus that we're looking at here. The depths, they sink lower. What color is your Bugatti, bro? No, see, I put too much British in it. Like there's too much British in it. And my Andrew Tate. I can only say water. Like he says it. I was just thinking about how fucking stupid he is the other day. He has a really weird voice because he grew up, he's like half British, half American. So his accent is just stranded in this no man's land. It's bizarre.
I love when people come to me and say, actually, we've got the data to prove what? You little what are you going to prove to me? I can prove to you that the ice caps are melting. There's ice in my water right now. I'm going to leave the water unattended until the ice melts. Will the water overflow out of the cup? No. Why are all the richest, most important people in the world who are pushing this scam buying beachfront homes? Oh, but the data says. The data's from the Matrix, and you are the Matrix, and the Matrix is still alive. Anyone who actually analyzes the data nowadays proves they're a
How do you...
Have you seen that graph thing, that meme, where you have the most stupid people and the most intelligent people do this?
Now, mind you, he's made a lot of... Candace, honey, darling. How do you... look at this man gesticulating like this, just sitting very awkwardly in front of a car, grumbling to himself. Yeah, why is he sitting like that? Couldn't tell you. Not providing any actual facts or sources to the things he's saying, the assertions he's making. And you think, you watch this, and you think, maybe he has some points. Man, why? Sources are for betas. That's very true.
If you even look at data nowadays, you're a dumbass. You should just know. Street smart people don't need data. We've just been around. You know? I've just been around. I just know things because I've just been around.
Honestly, that is so relatable to me. I can't even explain it.
Oh my God. Fuck, dude. I haven't seen this, but like, what are you doing, Candace? What are we doing here? Like, you just know. I've just been around. Like, I've just been around. Like, street smart people like me. I get the jabby jab. I've just been around. So, you know about vaccines and chemical compositions because you're street smart? You Bugatti-ass dipshit? And Candace sees that and is like, honestly, me. Oh my gosh. You're so real for this. Like, she saw that and was like, just like me for real. Fucking what? I'm stunned. I'm stunned at that fucking response. Like,
snares I find myself in where I'm unable to articulate the point. I'm unable to articulate the natural reaction that I have when somebody tries to sell me garbage. I can't articulate it when somebody explains to me, well, the moon landings definitely happened because this, and the firmament, and they could get, and I'm just like, no, I don't know. Instinctually, it just doesn't register to me. It just feels like that is a lie. And I've realized that I've been thinking deeply about this pagan cult that we exist in. It is backed by a false science deity. That is what it is. It is the science. Oh, this is the new God. And it is incredible to see the ways in which people worship this deity.
So this is something that a lot of hardcore, and she has done the whole Christ is King Christian nationalist thing. This is something I notice a lot of Christians have done, and they've done this for a while, right? Matt Walsh does it all the time. Other people, when they call other things a religion, like Candace is doing with science here, they've done it a lot with trans people and trans issues. And it's not because they actually have the standards or strictures of a religion. Like there's no commandments if you're queer. You know, like you can be queer and still be an asshole. Milo Yiannopoulos, we've talked about him today, is gay. I still believe he is gay. Like, it doesn't really work like that. But I think the reason that they have to oversimplify their opponents into that kind of category to say like, oh, because we have a religion, so they must also have a religion, even though most of them don't. Like even atheists, there's this idea that like, and I heard up. God, it's getting late for me. I grew up hearing this shit, right? Where atheists were also treated as a religion. Well, actually, that is their religion, and it's like, no. Like sometimes something is just different, but they get all of their moral justifications, everything in the world, who they think should be killed, who they think is different from them, why they think that's bad. They get all of that from their religion. So they need to have somebody else have something similar so they can feel like they're on an ideological balance, right? So that they can have my thing good, this thing bad. Because they're both religions. I can understand that framework, right? Except it's not that. Like, you can be Christian and be a scientist. Like, there are Christian scientists. That's kind of a different thing. But this trying to frame it as a religion just doesn't work for something, especially as expansive as science. Like, you're going to say every field of science is it its own denomination? Like, are you a cult member of science because you're like, oh, you know what? Actually, I'm getting sick. I think I'll take a flu remedy. I'll take a vitamin C packet. Are you going with which like here's you want to know the really ironic shit? So many aspects, like literally every aspect of this shit, both her and Andrew Tate benefit from. How the fuck do you think Andrew Tate got so ripped? Do you think it's just because he's built different, because he's naturally just such a fucking Sigma? No. It's because his personal trainers are using dietary plans and probably supplements, if not just like full-on growth hormone and testosterone. I wouldn't be surprised if that dude is pumped full of a chemical cocktail every morning. And whether that's, again, supplements or hormones, supplemented by a balanced diet that keeps incredibly low fat while allowing to build and maintain protein, guess what? All of that shit was discovered through science. The bitches, the dumbasses who follow data is what allows him to sit there looking all fucking like he can't even turn around to wipe his ass. Candace, the computer she's using, the lights in her house, the fact that she doesn't have measles or smallpox, science. So I guess like acknowledging those things makes you a cult member?
On the way out in June, because they understand that psychology is a part of the game, and they will make up the science. They will find the science so that you learn in school how educated you are
She is fucking
when you hold
unhinged.
these specific positions. And don't even get me started on history. Don't even get me started on history. Lie upon lie upon lie. I think the thing that broke me historically was learning about what they did, what we did, the Allies to the Germans. Unimaginable. Unimaginable that all we're learning about is the Holocaust, and then we allowed what happened to 12 million Germans thereafter who were put into concentration camps, tortured, raped, had their children killed, and we believe that we are the good guys or something like that. And so now I ask this question to myself. Literally, why was I put into public school? Why are we all put into public school?
I'm
and
sorry.
The answer is obvious.
Fucking
to be programmed,
what?
to be indoctrinated, to be baptized into this pagan faith. This is why the longer people stay in school,
This is why we... I can't. I'm fucking... 12 million Germans killed in concentration camps by America. And we put kids in schools to indoctrinate them into this religion, but don't worry about my kids I'm indoctrinating to not have vaccines and to be open to the possibility that the earth is flat. Flight and expulsion of Germans had fled or expelled from East Central Europe into Allied occupied Germany and Austria. Permanently or temporarily moved, by 1950, about 12 million had fled or been expelled from East Central Europe into Allied occupied Germany and Austria. 14.6 million, including a million ethnic Germans who had settled in territory conquered by Nazi Germany. Okay, so this was moving people who were in German territory that had been conquered during World War II back. Not America, for one thing. Not murdered, and not concentration camps. The areas affected included the former eastern territories of Germany, which were annexed by Poland, as well as the Soviet Union after the war, and Germans who were living within the borders of the pre-war Second Polish Republic, Czechoslovakia, Hungary, Romania, Yugoslavia, and the Baltic states. The death toll attributable to the flight and expulsions is disputed, with estimates ranging from 500,000 to 2.5 million. The parts that were taken over by Germany that had German people living there because they were moving in like, oh, hello, we now live in France. Now live in Poland. And she is trying to make that sound like it was a it was a Holocaust against the German people. To be clear, much of that death toll wouldn't have been the result of murder, disease, starvation, famine, etc. Oh yeah, like that also should be said. Like I'm not saying like, oh, they deserved it or anything. It fucking sucks I'm sure it sucked for a lot of people who were kids. I'm sure a lot of kids died. I'm sure a lot of women who were just following their husbands died. Like, sure, a lot of people in Germany thought like, oh yeah, you know, we're living a happy life. This Hitler's an okay guy. We're going to go get like fancy new homes in Poland. I'm sure it fucking sucked. However, that is an entirely different thing than what she's trying to portray here.
Donald J. Trump is Hitler. And of course, I've gone through it.
I don't know
really
anybody
has gone
who's
through this.
saying
But I'll never forget
literal.
this. Now that I'm on the other side of it and so many years have passed, the first time that I ever almost got canceled, it was because I was discussing Adolf Hitler in an academic sense. Actually, the subject wasn't even about Adolf Hitler. It was a question that was being asked of me. Remember this clip notoriously? They were asking about the word nationalism and why people are afraid of embracing the word nationalism. And I said that it was wrongly attributed to Adolf Hitler. And then BuzzFeed took me out of context and made it seem as though I was saying Hitler was a good guy, which of course I wasn't. That's always a hoax when somebody is pretending that someone jumped up and said that. But it didn't matter. People were incensed. They were demanding my cancellation. I had Jewish groups demanding my cancellation and saying, how dare I? And I even got blacklisted temporarily from Fox News until Stuart Varney was the first one who had me on his show. And we talked about the scandal and he gave me a piece of advice. He said, you know, you should just never talk about Adolf Hitler. And at the time I was so appreciative. I was like, thank you for allowing me to not have my entire platform canceled. But I reflect on that and I'm like, what an absolute nonsense that is. And I'm not saying this about Stuart Varney, but just that general idea. And that is an idea that permeates is that we are not allowed to discuss Adolf Hitler. Why? That is crazy, especially because he is the focus of all of our youth indoctrination, right? We have a visceral response when we hear his name. That's why I did the sound effect, dun, 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 because they've turned him almost into Lord Voldemort. I don't know if you're a Harry Potter fan. I definitely was and am.
Of course you are. Of course, that's all, like, of course you are. Like, have you tried not talking about Hitler? Black Brett Cooper. Oh, God. She's excusing you. Oh yeah, like again, they literally, they all think, especially because she is, I think I forgot to mention it, but she's actually like kind of tight with Tucker as two people who are getting like more and more blacklisted and further into wild conspiracy rabbit holes, which totally tracks. Tucker is in the bag for Putin, like in a big bad way. Like he went over to Russia and interviewed Putin. And so like they see what Putin is doing in Russia as a good thing, like being anti-LGBT, leading genocidal not genocidal, but leading expansionist campaigns, jailing, murdering his political opponents. Like they're in the bag for Putin. Yeah, well, Voldemort is Wizard Hitler. It's just that yeah, I am tired. Sorry, I read that SVNS and I was like, am I tired? Yeah, I'm tired. All right, let's keep going. Ethnic cleansing. Yeah, that's the right word.
And this whole concept of a dark lord who should not be named. Adolf Hitler is he who should not be named. And what's really interesting is that when you even discuss, you would assume, since that's the entire focus.
Okay, I do want to point out one super interesting thing here. And this is like, she's almost like Tim Pool brained. Right? Where like everybody knows that clip where Tim Pool was in that debate where he was trying to prove a point and he was like, oh, this person's actually like Thanos. And you know, like Thanos in the movie, like Thanos was actually the liberal for this. And the person who he's talking to is just like, what the fuck what are you talking about? I don't care. Shut up. Which I kind of notice it's like another little recurring theme we get. All these anti-intellectual people who are staunchly against like people like Andrew Tate who think like you're a stupid bitch. If you're out here reading data, you're a stupid bitch. And people like Candace who agree with that kind of philosophy will come out and say shit like, actually, this very real thing is just like this children's book. And I think that's very Tim Pool brain because it is like this idea of they want to critique culture and they want to have these big ideas, but they can really only ever filter those ideas through the lens of the most palatable, broad, child-friendly entertainment possible because that's like the only culture they've consumed at a deeper level. Because other than that, they're just busy reading through, I can't even call it political theory, because it like there's no real theory behind it, but they're reading through like political papers by people who agree with them and affirm what they believe. They're reading through fucking religious texts by people who agree with them and affirm what they believe. And so there's no other room for that like expansion behind it. That's just a little observation, I guess.
It's the nucleus of our idea of who a bad person is. Step aside Satan because we've got Adolf Hitler. When you assume that people therefore must know a lot about World War II, you then find out that actually Americans know nothing about World War II. My husband was amazed by this, by the way, obviously, because I'm in this sort of cross-national relationship. My husband was like, why do Americans always use Adolf Hitler as if he was the #1 mass murderer of the 20th century? He wasn't. What is this extreme focus on Nazis and Adolf Hitler as the only comparison we can ever make? And like I said, it's because we have been indoctrinated and we actually know nothing about the person other than the fact that we must fear him. And if you really, really, really want to insult someone, say, you are literally Hitler. Literally. And so, yeah, imagine my surprise. I've showed
fucking talked about this. We just fucking talked about this. 12 million people did not die. The Americans did not facilitate that. And it was not about ethnically cleansing. It was about removing people from land that they no longer had a right to be on. Because Hitler's fucked up world expansionist Third Reich campaign had taken it over from other people. And Germans had settled there.
Here's a clip again from that documentary I keep telling you that you have to watch. It premiered on BBC, and it is entitled The Savage Peace. I'm going to give you a clip here of a Czechoslovakian civilian who watched what was done to his German-speaking neighbors immediately following the end of the war. Take a listen. We're the same. You're probably thinking, but Candace, literally Hitler. Hey, the camps, that's what made it different. It was the camps. Imagine camps being used to kill people. Oh, you mean the exact same camps that we then transferred the Germans into so that we could, mass kill them? Yeah, I bet you've never heard the name Solomon Morel before, and you should know about him because Solomon Morel's an interesting character. He had some Soviet training, and then one day he just stood up on top of a table and said to these innocent German-speaking civilians, I'm going to torture you because I don't know where my parents are, and they were put into camps. And then he began to torture these individuals who were completely guilty of nothing. They were innocent. Here's another clip from that documentary. Take a listen. all under the direction of Solomon Morel. He was a particularly sadistic individual. And you might be thinking, oh, sure, something must have happened to him. He must have faced some consequences. And you'd be right. He did. In 1996, and this is according to his Wikipedia page, Solomon Morel was formally indicted of genocide by the Polish Public Prosecutor's Office. The indictment was later amended to include war crimes, crimes against humanity, and communist crimes because he was a commie. The latter charge was added in 2004 and constitutes a specific crime under Polish criminal law. So in 1998, Poland requested that he be extradited for the trial, but Israel refused. Yeah, that's where he was hiding out in Israel. And so Israel sent a reply to the Polish Justice Ministry from the Israeli government that said that they would not extradite him.
Yeah, she's saying Israel is doing
the statute of limitations and war crimes. So you can put, Germans into a pyramid, innocent civilians. You can watch them suffer. You can murder them in mass. And I don't know, I guess statute of limitations can expire. That's all I'm going to say on that because Israel is, of course, our greatest ally, the most moral everything in the world. Do you know who else agreed with those Czechoslovakian civilians that the things that were done to the Germans were utterly horrific?
She's like legitimately seething over
this. With
this.
his name because he was a very decorated U.S. general in World War II who led the Third Army, both in France and in Germany. Well,
yeah, no, she's trying to do whataboutism with
the military
Hitler.
Governor in Bavaria, and he led denazification efforts because that's what we're doing. We're trying to denazify the territory. That's a great effort. But then they say that as he was leading this, he became increasingly erratic. PBS states that in April of 1945, he was removed by Eisenhower from his leadership of the Third Army for making inflammatory remarks concerning the denazification policies. What were those policies? He said, quote, "We may have been fighting the wrong enemy all along, but while we're here, we should go after the bastards now because we're going to have to fight them eventually." It's referring to the Soviets that trained that person that I just showed you, who were utterly sadistic and mass murdering Germans for no reason other than the fact that they were speaking German. They hadn't even noted Adolf Hitler had nothing to do with anything, but they had to die. So yeah, if that's what your concern is, if you're worried about camps, we did that. If you're worried about ethnic cleansing, we did that. Don't even get me started on...
We did that? What? Do you think we were the Soviets? Like, how are you going to say, oh, this is what the Soviets were doing? We did that. We had people in camps. And we ethnically cleansed 12 million people. God! Oh, she's so dumb. She's so dumb. She's just so dumb, dude.
In Nagasaki. That's not the crime. The crime is not firebombing people through Ash Wednesday in Dresden who were civilians, children. No, that's not the crime. The crime is you knowing. It's me knowing. That's the real problem. And I got to stop knowing these things. I got to stop knowing about Pol Pot. I got to stop knowing about the Cambodian genocide and knowing that, of course, there were people that did worse things throughout history. Especially as a Christian, I have got to stop talking about Henry Yagoda. They get real upset when you talk about the Bolsheviks. You want to know why? Because the Bolsheviks were never brought to heel. The Bolsheviks never had to face trials. There were no Nuremberg trials for the Bolsheviks. In fact, many of them came to America, and many of them are in positions of power right now. And that's why they get real angry when you start looking into history, when you start recognizing that they are intentionally telling.
She is literally like you combine this. Holy fuck. You combine this with what we were hearing earlier. She is literally laying out anti-Semitic conspiracy theory, like just straight up that Jews, the Bolsheviks, were never brought to heel and that they're in positions of power now. And that's why you can't criticize Israel. Unfucking believable. She's so cooked. Cooked and washed at the same time. In the oven, then in the dryer. God damn.
Christians just shut up about the Christians that have been killed all across the world. They get very uncomfortable when you know stuff that they did not put into your book when you were in middle school to traumatize you into compliance of believing that the only bad people ever, there's only two of them, by the way, Putin and Adolf Hitler. So to those people, I'm just going to say, spare me, because I'm not going to stop talking about real history. I'm going to educate people that follow me about real history, because it's the only way that we're going to prevent these psychopaths from doing more psychopathic things.
It's also very funny that her definition of real history comes from, like, I saw a BBC documentary. Like, that's her. This is the real shit. This is the shit they don't want you to hear about. Nobody knows about this. I saw it on the TV. Fuck, man.
In the future, if you're looking for people that behave like literally Hitler, it ain't me, buddy. You got to start examining your own government. That's all I'm going to say on that topic. You know the reality that's surrounding us right now. A lot of us are struggling to keep up with everyday bills. Food, gas, the power bill.
You are married to a rich asshole. Shut up.
Notifications so that you hear more. Follow us on that I never thought I'd experience. Our family has been through unimaginable hardships, and now we find ourselves on the brink of losing everything. Just under 4 years ago, our lives were shattered when my brother was involved in a tragic...
Okay, so this is the Kyle Rittenhouse thing. So that's it. That's all I'm willing to go through of Candace Owens tonight. God damn, y'all. Like she it's almost impressive because she's kind of like freestyling anti-Semitism, right? Like she's not going to the old text yet. I'm sure. Don't get me wrong. She'll hit the protocols at some point with the trajectory that she's on if she hasn't already. But like she's just kind of like mixing and mashing different like weird obscure conspiracy theories to be like, oh, actually, and there was this 12 million genocide, and that allowed the Bolsheviks to come over to America and take control. And it's like, okay, well, Candace, how does that work with also if the Nazis came over to America to take control? Like what? How does all that square? If commies are all, or if the CIA is evil and commies are evil, then what does it say about like the CIA setting up banana republics in South America? Like, yeah.